Corrections and Institutions Committee. It is Tuesday, March 18th. And we're picking up again with our legal staff, John Gray, just finish going over the language. So let's go to page 21.
John Gray, Legislative Counsel. Jumping right back in, we are, again, in this instance, we are now in the funding section. So we're out of our first 16 sections that dealt with the appropriations for particular projects. We're now talking about the funding. We just went through in section 17 the set of reallocations. And now section 18 sets out the general authority for the treasurer to issue bonds. So section 18, state treasurer is authorized to issue general obligation bonds in the amount of $100 million for the purpose of funding the appropriations made in sections 2 through 16. Shall determine the appropriate form of maturity. So technical provisions. One thing I would call out here is that old capital bills prior to last year included a final sentence for this section that said something like, if I can read my handwriting, the treasurer would allocate the costs of the bond issuance to the particular entities. My understanding is that last year there was a request from the administration to remove that, allocating the cost of issuing the bonds to the entities. So consistent with last year's approach, this doesn't include that line, meaning that the costs are not presumably allocated to the entities for which the appropriations are being made.
I think it's being funded a little different now. I think it's going through the debt service line or something inappropriate. It's doing something different because is it through the debt service line?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, because every time, whenever in the past, whenever you bond anything, even though it's 100,000 that they go out for that particular project to bond for, you have to give it a little haircut because there's a cost to the bond. And we used to do that off every item here. And we didn't account for it necessarily when we did markup or anything. But that's how it was done through the treasurers. And now it's coming out of the debt service line and appropriations. Okay.
Makes more sense.
It's just kind of a shift that was just made. Okay.
So that's your section 18, $100 million in bonding.
That's what the Debt Affordability Committee has recommended for the 2 years.
50 each. Yep. I'm going to jump past section 19A. You'll recall that I
Took that out.
So we can jump to 19B, which is taking the approach that you guys have taken in the past for dealing with cash. So what this section does is it basically establishes the intent to authorize these capital projects in the Appropriations Act. And then it sets out what those projects are. So this could hopefully align with what's done in the Appropriations Act, but the actual appropriations would be made there. So that's what you're seeing in subsections A and B. Intent to authorize certain capital projects, appropriate the funds in the Appropriations Act. This would include both fiscal years 26 and 27. We don't know yet what those 20 would be. There may be additional.
Appropriations only budgets 1 year.
So
Appropriations doesn't budget a 2-year budget. That's why you can only know what's available for cash for FY26.
and
When you come back in January of 26, there'll be a different amount for FY27 for cash.
so what you can think of this call out to subsection E as doing is consistent with that fact of the appropriations process. It's creating an adjustment-like process, just as is done for bonding in the capital bill, but for cash. It creates an adjustment for the cash. Subsection C, this is your actual authorizations. So this is like your appropriations, but again, we would wait for the Appropriations Act to carry out those appropriations. In fiscal year 26, from the capital infrastructure subaccount, so your main account that backs capital projects, to BGS for statewide major maintenance, $8 million. I would call out, this is a figure that if you were looking to trim or move cash, there was some discussion that this might be a figure you could drop down and reduce that cash.
Okay.
But there was no agreement to drop it. It's just that if that becomes the discussion, this was the figure that was talked about.
Oh, the 8 million for major maintenance.
Exactly.
We talked about major maintenance and that was the big one because some folks here had concern about using cash from the chunk, the two biggest chunks.
It's not much accountability there.
Right. Right, because they have a lot of small projects and it's, the other big chunk of cash that's going out is 8 million for the Windsor County Courthouse. Those are your two biggest projects there. You're back.
I am.
I'll need 'em.
Never.
I could call you down here more often. You wouldn't have to sit there.
So again, no highlighting means consistent with administration proposal. So that's what you're saying for statewide maintenance, planning, reusing contingency, physical security enhancements. Sub 4, this is a funny one in my opinion. Shave $237 off of the cash piece for this authorization for State House repointing.
They had money on the bottom line and they had to put it
Yes.
somewhere.
Somebody asked for that to go back to 500. I can't remember who did it.
It's
I
like,
believe that the mayor asked for.
Yes.
Yeah, it was me.
it would cost more to put it back there in copies and staff time. Just leave it alone.
Certainly.
It was 29, it was 219,723. Now they had money on the bottom line, had to put it somewhere. That's when you would see an odd number like.
Under ain't free.
Hmm?
Under's not free.
You know? Subdivisions 5 and 6, again, consistent with the administration request. Here's your 250K for that Middlesex print and postal facility. Recall that we talked earlier about the specific appropriation that was backed by a reallocation for the Middlesex print and postal facility of 58K. So in total, that's around 308.
Yep.
And then you got your 8 million for the Windsor County Courthouse. Last piece here, and you'll recall Scott chiming in about this 1.5 million in cash to the Vermont Veterans Home for the design of the American unit. And again, we talked about a reallocation from the B and C units to the A unit, that reallocation of 1.5 million to permit essentially this appropriation of cash for design of the American unit, which the testimony suggested was, I guess, more ready to go at this point, or more of an option.
What we did with this one, we took the 1.5 million and just moved it to what the language says on page 20. You just move it to the section 19, which is the pot of cash.
Mhm.
That's what it does. It's not on page 20 where lines 8 through 13, it doesn't say it's going to a wing. It's just going to the cash fund, the pot and the cash fund.
For sure.
And then on lines in page 24, lines 17 and 18, we're expending the 1.5 from that pot.
So I will just say, I think mathematically that works. This is maybe like a broader question about, it's the same conversation about whether you are defraying expenditures of the act as a whole, or if you're specifying particular pot. I think that you can throw things into the bonded pot or the cash pot, and it should work out, and you don't have to call out such a tight statutory reference. To me, the advantage of using something like section 19 and then specifying the subdivision in which that A wing is made is that you just make clear that thinking, like it will show a reader the tie between the reallocation for that purpose.
Mhm.
But mathematically, I don't think that it matters.
It tells you what legislative intent is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about not doing math on the spot, but sometimes it is helpful to do so, even if it endangers your career. I don't know.
Who knows?
So, you'll recall we were talking above about your primary sub-account that you think about, that capital infrastructure sub-account. Now, when we jump down to subsection B,
Mhm.
we're talking about your other infrastructure sub-account. And let me just make sure that I'm on the right scroll, actually. We're on page 20.
24,
Bottom.
bottom of 24 and top of 25.
Yes, there we go. So, now we're talking about the other infrastructure sub-account in fiscal year 26. Authorizing to A&R for Department of Environmental Conservation for the state match, 14.5 million. This is the figure that Scott was mentioning earlier in conjunction with the discussion around municipal pollution grant.
So for the municipal pollution folks, James, Gina, and Will, this is where your 14.5 is.
Yeah.
Okay, forgive me. Am I supposed to be able to see that 14.5?
Line 7. It's not in our
Not in
capital
spreadsheet.
bill.
Because it's in sub-account B.
It's in sub-account B, and we
Okay.
did this 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, we put aside this money.
Right.
We had cash, we had surplus, we put it aside, and we put it in the sub-account B of the cash fund to hold. Because all the federal money was not gonna be it's available over a 5-year period. So the last 2.5 to 2 years of the federal dollars being available is just now coming up. So now we're releasing the 14.5 million. So there's money. There's money coming from this as well for your drinking water revolving loan fund and your clean water revolving loan fund. It's not just municipal pollution
I guess
grants.
4 million.
It's a broad, it's a bigger
It's a real big.
reference to projects than.
So you folks who are doing drinking water and wastewater, you have to ask Eric about this too.
This could be split into specific cash appropriations, both to DEC, but you could split it to say this much for this program, this much for that program. There's other ways to structure this line, basically.
Because we also, it'd be really helpful. I don't know if it would be Scott or you, John, but it would be really helpful for James, Gina, and Will to get, we have put aside, and they've expended quite a bit of it, I believe there was 9.8 million that was put aside earlier for match for the IIJA. And there was money put aside earlier for municipal pollution grants. And it would be really good for James, Gina, and Will to get that total that was put aside for the IIJA match, which is what this 14.5 is also for. I think it was 9.6, 9.8. It was put aside. I want to know how much of that's out the door. And that would be for James, Gina, and Will.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta ask those questions specifically. Cause it, So over the last 2 or 3 years, there was about 9.8. I think they've expended most of it. And I also want to know how much has been put in for municipal pollution grants, because we did put money aside for municipal pollution grants as well. I think we put aside 6 million. Maybe,
It's on one column, it's around that.
because that came, I don't know if that was ARPA. There was money.
Yeah,
put
I think it was during
Our-
that time.
It was around 6 million. You're not gonna see any of this on our spreadsheet. None of it is on our spreadsheet. There's ARPA money.
So this would be an example, right?
That's municipal pollution. But where did that money come from?
So that's cash. Those three are cash.
These 3 are cash.
But I will give them.
But there was ARPA money also added on to this.
Okay.
There was a ARPA money added. There was, and then there was IIJA match. There was a lot of money moving around for municipal pollution grants, drinking water revolving loan, and clean water revolving. Previous over the last 3 years or so.
I can tell you.
Most of that went to Burlington and Swan.
Yeah. But we'll follow up with them again.
Yeah.
Looking through some of the stuff I had done earlier, I do see that in Act 78, 9.8 for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. That was in Act 78, and as of February 23rd at least, The report the administration gave to me said they had $2,380 left of that 9.8. So
Okay,
Guess they use.
I'll look and see about the other 6 million and whatever. else.
the municipal pollution, yeah, because there was a lot of money there for
You can
municipal
split
pollution.
the 2,000.
And that was ARPA dollars as well as bonded, as well as capital, cash, capital bill, whatever. Because there's been a lot of moving money over the last 4 years on this. So we're freeing up 14.5 million. I know that there's nothing being requested this year in the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund for our state match. I think part of that's because of 14.5, and other reasons, there's other reasons there too. Okay. You free got it?
Yep.
Okay. Next,
Okay. 3Bs, that's what we're talking about on line 8. Cash to ACCD for the Housing Development Assistance Grant Program. You guys haven't yet seen that language, but we will complete shortly, 2 million. Which, just to call out, that's a reduction from the 3.1 that had been proposed in bonded dollars for those 3 projects. Subsection E, authorizing the commissioner to transfer unexpended project balances between that in C7, which is your American unit, Vermont Veterans Home, and the emergency generator and boiler plant replacement at the Vermont Veterans Home. So providing that flexibility, and again, that notwithstanding language, that's just talking about the above a particular dollar figure, secretary approval is required, so this notwithstanding avoids that secretary approval. I can jump down to the policy section. Folks are, yeah, so we're now out of money. Not out of money, but we are out of the money section.
Oh,
We
that's
may
not
also
good.
be out of.
That sounded ominous.
I think both are true.
Yeah. The first of these that you're gonna see are the policy proposals in the governor and the administration recommendations. So these are not things that the group has expressed an appetite for. They're just included as placeholders for discussion. I think I can probably guess your reactions will be. But for the first of these, we're talking about the cash fund. And you'll see here on page 26, the proposed amendments are that
this
the,
is the governor's proposed amendments,
exactly.
which we have not talked about or totally agreed to.
Yep. Capital infrastructure subaccount to consist of annual transfers of 4%, removing that or less language, so getting that firm 4% figure of the last completed fiscal year's general fund appropriations, less the amount necessary to fund those debt service payments.
Well, did you mention that may shall online?
It's the may shall.
Yeah.
That's the big change, the may shall, and that's where we'll run into issues with appropriations committees. Right there.
So I was not expecting you guys to want this, but it's just, if you want to talk about it, we can.
I thought the majority vote already was not to do it.
Right, we do.
Yeah, we discussed this at length.
Yeah. Not to do it.
Right.
I was a shall person, I was in the minority,
Here's
but we don't need
I
to.
want
We don't need
May.
to.
Need the may,
So we're crossing, this is.
section 20.
Page
26.
This
Let me,
Two.
I can finish reading out that subdivision A if helpful, because it sounds like you guys are just rejecting wholesale the amendment, but just so you know what you're rejecting in full. The last clause of that is as determined by the state treasurer and commissioner at the time of budget preparation. So, you know, you may want to include that at the time of budget preparation at the end of this clause, but I don't know that you can also just leave the language as is if you're just rejecting the concept.
We talked about it earlier and we rejected it. It's also the same language in the budget bill, the big bill. Didn't agree to it.
So that is quite simple. And
The whole thing is coming out, or are we just putting it back to
The
the?
whole thing.
Okay.
It was the whole thing.
We're just putting May back there in line 2.
I think I'm just cutting this section.
Give it back to a pro.
Okay.
Well,
So you're putting
we don't have control over cap.
The whole section, I'm just getting rid of that section.
It's the
Funding
formula,
counts.
it's the formula is still in place.
Got it.
The
Yeah,
formula
no,
is-
I understand that.
It will retain the
I just thought that we
underlying
were
cash fund language as is. That's the result.
The majority vote in the committee was not to do that.
Not to have the cash come back to us?
Oh, that part.
Yeah, that part.
The cash from
Yes,
when we
so-
reallocate.
Yeah,
We didn't make any decision on that because we had Representative Harrison came in and recommended we just keep the status quo on those reallocation process because things are so volatile right now in the budgeting world, in their world, things are so volatile that they had requested we just keep everything status quo as it is and give them, it allows them the flexibility because things are pretty volatile.
Can we give them back the flexibility though?
we haven't taken it.
We haven't taken it.
That's what I'm saying. If we did take it.
There's a point of clarification, Representative Harrison was representing the committee's position and not necessarily his own.
Right, he was here for the committee,
Right.
because that's where the committee is following, and he's representing the committee's position
Yeah, no, I understand.
for that. So he recommended keep everything the status quo because there's so much uncertainty right now in the fiscal.
Yeah, and I'm saying change it to the status quo and then if they need the money, they can come ask us for it. They need that cash back.
Well, as it stands, they could just take it.
To them. They can just take it.
Unilaterally.
Remember, our bill goes to a probes and they can amend our bill.
Right.
Yeah.
And
If-
even though I would like to see a change in the long run, we have beat this to death as a committee and.
Yes.
We got
Yeah,
that.
I'm all good with the May shall thing. I don't care about that. I just.
I'm here for naming
The cash
buildings.
came back.
I want to beat something to death,
Oh,
naming
we do.
buildings.
Sure.
Well, we do a lot of that upstairs, so I know. But there's no sense of rehashing what we're.
I understand that I got looked on that one. Okay, we can move on to the next thing.
You weren't alone. Just.
Yeah.
Is that a 10-1
First time,
vote?
won't be the last.
No,
Joe, was that a 10-1 vote?
no. But to be a martyr.
That's tomorrow.
Okay, let's
It
keep
should be
going.
the section that we should have Joe do on the floor.
Nice.
Let's keep going.
So section 21, we're talking about the form of the capital construction bill. This is a timing update. So at the top of page 27, you'll see that on or before November 15th of each year, the Commissioner of Finance and Management requires each entity to which spending authority has been authorized in a capital bill that was 2 or more years prior to the current legislative session submits a report on the current fund balances with unexpended funds, which includes plans for the unexpended funds, any projects, contracts the funds are assigned to, anticipated timeline for expending the funds. The significance of this, you can think of this as tying into those reallocation provisions, basically, which are meant to have a timely check-in on those functions. So getting a report on what's actually happening with the dollars. The actual amendment is to this subdivision 2. So previously, in existing law, what it says is that on or before December 15th of each year, commissioners shall submit in a consolidated format those reports to the committees of jurisdiction. And now this has been updated to be not later than the 3rd Tuesday of each year. So presumably start of the legislative session.
There's-
This was part of the administration's recommended.
We never really talked about this. So not later than the 3rd Tuesday of each year. So that implies the 3rd Tuesday in January?
That's the way that I read this to be, is that it's the start of the legislative session is.
So on or before the 15th, Commissioner of Finance and Management needs to require every entity which has gotten capital construction dollars that is 2 or more years old, that they need to submit the current fund balance for each of those projects with the unexpended funds. So that's where your unexpended funds would end up being part of your reallocation that the governor would propose in his budget. And then by the 15th of December, that Commissioner of Finance and Management would need to submit that consolidated format to the House Corrections.
Yep. So basically giving the legislature, giving you guys sets of reports on those unallocated funds.
We never look at them.
Well, that's precisely what the subcommittee, the reallocation subcommittee asks for. So this is heading that off. One, so the governor funds the administration funds the money first. Two, to anticipate what we've been doing as an allocation, as
You
reallocation.
guys asked for that change.
We did. No, we didn't ask for this.
No, it's the
You're
government.
saying that this gets in the, you guys asked for this kind of information. And you're typically ahead of the curve is the way you're describing.
But
Yeah,
what they're saying, instead of us getting the information about where
we're not getting it from each agency. We're getting it from the Commissioner of Finance.
right, but what it says currently is by the 15th of December, we should be receiving
Yeah.
to know what the reallocation, potential reallocation amounts will be in the capital bill.
And then the Commissioner of Financing is, there's a buffer here. The Commissioner of Financing gets that report from each agency and says to this committee, here's what we found.
On the 15th by December 15th.
No, well, right now.
That's current.
Yeah,
That's current. I don't remember getting it.
no,
So what the administration is proposing, that not later than the third Tuesday of each year. That sounds funny to me, of each year.
It's almost like when we start. Just. the
Are they
first
implying,
Tuesday
and
after
I
the
don't,
fair,
right
Tuesday of
before,
the-
I don't want to put you on the spot at all. Are they implying that this would be presented when the governor proposes the state budget?
Right, that's.
Is that what the thinking
Just
is?
that's what
I
it's
think they're
on.
asking.
Cause that's what like.
I know,
you
I know, but
Yeah.
it says the way it's written, the third Tuesday
Yeah.
of each year.
I think
mean, come
Will,
on.
Will has an answer.
That's correct, and it's.
Will, could you identify yourself for the record,
I'm
please?
Will Anderson from Finance and Management. That's correct. The idea is to present it at the same time that the budget is presented, and the reasoning is basically a timing one. Because it's a pretty busy time of the year in developing the BA and the budget to also develop this report.
Why can't we be clear? There's language in terms in other parts of statute about when the governor presents their budget.
So do you just want it at the same time as that?
Yeah,
I can
why don't we
talk to
just
the-
pick up that language? Not that, no later than the third Tuesday of each year is like, what? Of each year of what?
I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can change this. I think the main question is, it sounds like you guys are amenable to making this change is the first question.
It's the calendar year.
It's when the governor presents his budget.
budget.
It's when the governor presents their budget that this would be included in their budget. That's what that is really saying. And there's language elsewhere in statute that talks
Yeah.
about when the governor needs to propose
Okay.
the
So
state
you
budget. So
wanna
you
make-
just track that language.
And specifically, we're talking about big budget, not capital budget.
Correct.
Right.
Well, it's done at the same
Oh,
time,
yeah.
Okay. I'm just making sure I have, because there are two different statutory references.
right? So it's whatever statute reference there is when the governor presents, there's the governor's budget. State, it's general fund budget, it's capital budget, it's transportation, but it's all done at once.
Okay. Easy enough.
But sometimes it's not the third Tuesday in the month. Sometimes it's earlier than that. I've seen the budget presented the first week of January, sometimes, or the second week of January.
It was late this year.
It's the third week of the session,
Oh, it's-
or whatever.
So we started. Okay.
I've seen the budget, state budget being produced the second week of the session that we're here. It's only been, recently, it's been late. I mean, it's been at the very end of the time frame that it's allowed.
Section 22, this is going to look funny because there are literally no amendments made to this. This is just a placeholder for discussion. We're talking about the form of the capital budget. So the way that this information is presented to you guys, I recall there being discussion about wanting charts that allow people to track the flow of money over time.
Yes.
But we are charters.
So I can make a change to this, but I wanted you guys to see what the language actually currently is. And then if you have a specific request, I can just include something to that effect. I think the thing I had suggested when this was first posed to me is if there was an informal way of accomplishing this. But if you guys have pushed for this information, just not getting it.
I think they agreed, didn't they?
Well, I brought it to the attention. I think, let me see if I can find,
I thought Wanda and Joe agreed to try.
well, that's BGS. They don't put together the
Oh,
capital.
yeah.
It's the agency of administration that
right.
puts it together.
Those people.
So I'm thinking, when we say chart, this is what we're thinking.
Mhm.
Yes.
Have you seen this before, John?
I have not.
You send that down. Well, yeah.
Secret notes.
No, I don't care about the notes. I wanted to see one that has quite a bit of charts.
In folks to let you
You can flip it over. I think the other chart has a little
Specifically
bit
you.
more moving pieces. We used to have in our book for projects that were in the capital bill, regardless if it was in BGS or the DOC or judiciary, we had that type of chart in there for each project listed.
I get a copy of it.
Maybe I think I can get enough,
Flip it over because
yeah, I looked at the more
Spanish,
one.
there's previous, there's bonded.
That shows you across the board what's there and what's not.
I think he's got the idea.
The, I guess my question would be, thank you.
You want to do that, this is in statute.
Exactly. So that's part of my question is if you want to codify this request. I always hesitate to not push people to not codify things because I'm very self-interested in not amending things, obviously, but you can take whatever approach you want. It sounds like the high level, if you were to say the high level things that you specifically want a chart to contain,
Right.
is it like, what's the simple way of referencing that? Tracking dollars over time is the basic thing. The allocation between cash and bonded. What's been spent to date? I don't know, like,
If you had a picture of this or something, you would be able to.
yeah, I can do that. And I drew a little picture for myself that's,
Yeah, but actually, we're wanting all of it to have a timeline of what we've got bonded cash or in some other projects or where we're at. Right now, we don't have that.
I'm just struggling, do we want this in statute? Or how could we get the message to the administration, how we really want the capital book
We can
to
write
be
a-
displayed?
Like, take our language out if we said that this was what we were wanting and it wasn't in statute. Should we start with it not being in statute? Then if we have to go to it next year, we do. But this is kind of a, would like to have this happen for everyone's knowledge, not,
Yeah.
Yeah, we could write a memo. Right?
Connor?
Yeah, I might be in the minority. I like codifying it. Commissioners change, committee members change. It was really helpful having that spreadsheet with the long line. And I think it helps, it forces us to think, strategically.
Connor.
I'll go with that.
Yeah.
John, you got work to do now.
I second
So,
that
Because why am I not surprised?
but I also have an additional comment and it kind of answered it on page 28. It's just codifying the current fiscal year and the ensuing 9 years.
exactly, this is forward looking, this,
Right, and I kind of like having the backwards looking just a little bit, obviously not as far, but at least a biennium. Let's just look back at what we did in the previous.
so
Absolutely.
So I think-
Talks even not. I was looking at one here that's
2 or 3 years.
approved through, one part of the chart said approved through FY 24. So there was money previous to FY 24
Oh, that was lumped.
that was lumped in. That's what you need to see.
so if I'm understanding correctly, basically, you're comfortable with the forward looking portion of the information received.
Mhm.
And you would like a mirror version of that forward-looking information for the years prior to that, basically. So
In fact, they also, at some point, some charts we've seen has also had what the monies were used for. Was it in planning? Was it construction? So you knew where in the process it was. And I wonder, was that in judiciary that we had that? It wasn't in BGS. We didn't have that for anything in BGS. It was a Department of Safety.
did you have a particular year period you would like the backward look? Or
Well, what it was, they started here with approved through FY 24. So
This-
that was approved up to last year's or the last bienniums. And then they had FY 24-25.
Yeah, so
So the approved through FY 24 incorporated anything that was in FY 22 or 23, but it didn't list out those fiscal years.
you know what I mean? I had a bucket for previous allocation or appropriation, but it all together. So maybe
Wasn't that?
$8 million was spent on already, so it's in a bucket.
Yeah, it doesn't distinguish between two here, but it says,
Yeah.
8 has gone toward the project.
Yeah.
Well, it distinguished if it was cash or bond. Right.
Sure. If that,
Find one that they had. But also, well.
Good one, I can photocopy it and give it to him so he'll have an example.
But it's not, because I know that there was one. It's one that BGS made up. This is, shows bonded and cash, but there was one that showed where in the construction process it was. Planning, design, construction.
Was it a previous to this edition? Like, was it the,
Well, it was another item.
right, but I mean, was it in the, even earlier than this, was last?
I think it was this. Might have been. So I have seen it. We had too much going on. So we want some form of charts, right?
Yep.
Okay. Just, they didn't do it last year. Sure. It's part of the problem. We'll work with you, John. Okay?
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the existing language for what's to be contained in this 10-year plan. And on page 29, looking at subdivision 2, comprehensive cost and financing assessment. So typically this is a forward-looking piece, right? But here we see amounts appropriated and expended for the current fiscal year and for the preceding fiscal year shall be indicated for capital programs and for individual projects. You know, you could add something that basically this is extended backwards.
Yep.
Beyond that fiscal year. And then for B, amounts proposed, not B. C, the capital costs of programs and of individual projects, including funds for the development and evaluation of each project, shall be presented in full for the entire period of their development. So admittedly, this is my first time looking at this language really, and it is in the context of talking about a 10-year plan that is forward-looking. But some of this to me feels like you can hang a request for this information. Like, if you're meant to include the capital costs of programs and individual projects in full for the entire period of their development, that to me sounds broader than, but maybe I just need to spend more time looking at it.
So this is silent, 32 VSA, section 310, and 32 VSA, page, I'm on 27, page 27. This is the section 22. It's 32 VSA. This is directing the governor and the administration how they put together the budget, right? So it's not specific to the agency of administration or the Department of BGS, right? Or is
I-
it specific to the Agency of Administration? Because a few years ago, BGS put together the whole capital bill. And that was gradually moved over the years to the Agency of Administration. And I think we've lost a lot in that transition. We had a lot more hands-on knowledge when BGS put together the whole capital bill, because everything was submitted to them. Of course, they had to have everything approved by the fifth floor. But that has been removed from BGS's authority. They don't even put together their own section anymore. And it all goes up to the fifth floor. The Agency of Administration puts together the capital bill. So it's a very, very different focus of putting together the capital. Because BGS used to get into much more of the cash flow. They used to get into much more of the construction process for each of the projects that were like in the judiciary or in the vet's home or in agriculture for some of that. They were much more specific in knowing what was going on. And now it's more removed. Just for context,
Mhm.
for people to understand what's happening here. So I'm not so convinced that the Agency of Administration, because they have so much going on in their world, that they pay much attention to maybe the flow of dollars in a project as BGS used to do for each across state government.
Last time that BGS did.
It started to transfer to Agency of Administration, I want to say 2016.
I'm gonna say like 6 or 7 years ago.
It was a while. It was at the end of Governor Shumlin. It was at the very, very tail end, like the last year, they did a little bit. And then when Governor Scott came in is when the real final move happened, but it started under Governor Shumlin. Like the last year of his term, whenever that was. Is that 16?
That would have been.
So 16.
16. Wanda would know because Wanda was in BGS at that point.
Kobe.
Maybe Obi, yeah, they want to take it away. So there's a shift there in terms of how much in depth. BGS used to go in pretty much in depth with the different agencies and departments and state government when they made their capital requests to BGS. Now it goes to the Agency of Administration. And I think because there's so much going on in the Agency of Administration, because they're responsible for so much more, I don't think it gets, I mean, tell me I'm wrong, but I think that it's a higher level. It's not getting into the minutia as much. So for us, as a legislative committee, we may not get as much information as we used to. And that's why those charts are so important. For that.
So when you do receive this 10-year thing, who is it that is delivering that?
That is in our, basically, it showed up with governor's recommended budget in the spreadsheet, because it goes out 10 years.
And so is what you're saying that you would not want to make the request for backward-looking information in this section because it would be the agency doing that?
So it's the agency that puts together the budget, so it has to be the agency that puts it, Agency of Administration that does the charts. It would have to be. I mean, when we first get the budget, when we got the book that first day, and I said, where are the charts? Looking at each project, where are the charts? We can't see what's been expended in the past and what it's been used for.
And just so I'm understanding, the person that are you speaking to BGS when you're saying that, or are
I
you?
said it to the agency of administration.
Okay,
I said it to both.
and did. Okay,
BGS responded because they understood, because Wanda
Yeah.
was there before, so I know exactly what you're talking about. We can do that.
I think the thing that confuses me, and my confusion doesn't especially matter, like, I'll just do what you guys need to have done, but the confusing things to me is that it is in their interest to do this, because otherwise they have to keep coming back.
And that's what's happened this year.
Right, and
So that is part of why I had hoped that maybe there's an informal solution, but if there's differences in parties returning, right, if it's not the agency returning, then that doesn't make sense. They aren't penalized for not providing the chart because they don't need to come back. Okay. So that's, to me, just kind of a practical question.
Right, and also what Connor said, you have a different administration, and it'd be good to codify it so that regardless of who's on the fifth floor, they know what they need to do. So,
Okay.
I mean, is it asking too much to go 10 years out and 4 years back on every chart?
well, they have to, well, 10 years out, I mean, look at,
Right.
I mean,
All right,
put
well
it on the
then,
spreadsheet, but the charts at least show how much money has been expended,
Right,
has been
okay.
appropriated in the past, and particularly now that we have cash, we have bonded, we have cash, we have all sorts of stuff. It's
Right.
really hard to keep it track. And I think they do.
Yeah.
These charts did future requirements.
Yeah.
I
right.
mean, it's very, you're not gonna, a 10-year plan, it's gonna change.
right.
But it kind of gives you a thought on how far out is it going to be.
Okay. Should we try to hit the last?
That's the piece.
So let's jump to page 30, section 23.
Sheriff, we're gonna have to read this line by line, folks. When we get the final draft,
We're cheering.
line by line, and then we have to make sure the numbers are accurate. Track spreadsheet.
So what you're saying in section 23, this is not something that I drafted. This was language that was pulled from H 397, which is,
Yeah.
I think, a flood resiliency big.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
gonna take testimony on this tomorrow,
Okay,
and it might be helpful. You said you were available at 9 o'clock.
available now.
It'd be helpful to have you in the room.
Okay.
This is not a slam dunk.
I can be here. Can I get an invite? Yes, thank you.
This is really important. This one's not a slam dunk. This one's gonna cost the state.
So just to quickly hit this, on or before July 1, 2026, BGS to finalize a transfer of state-owned real property in Waterbury, referred to as the Randall Meadow. BGS to grant Waterbury the ability to either acquire ownership of the property or an option to purchase shall remain available for a period of 10 years. BGS to transfer this property to Waterbury. Waterbury may use the property for future flood resilient development. Prior to completing transfer, department shall contract for engineering and other necessary services to create a higher volume floodway within the bounds of the property. So again, part of that broader flood resiliency conversation, but basically having BGS create an ownership right for Waterbury in this particular property.
But doing the engineering ahead of that?
We're gonna get into this. This is complicated.
Right, like,
Do the engineering and then sell
Yeah, they want us to do the work on the property.
Yeah.
Have Representative Wood and Stevens been notified? Bill, have Representative Wood and Stevens been notified?
Representative Wood has been
Okay,
notified.
might just want to get a little out to Representative Stevens as well.
this is his part of the budget,
There was a bill 471 that was introduced,
right?
and this is language from that bill, John?
No, it's a different bill.
It's 397.
One of Teddy's that.
Yes, it's Teddy. Yep.
I think it's
That is,
a.
one is the transfer of
It's
state-owned property.
471. Where's 397? I don't see 397.
This may not have it, but this is at least where this is. I can look at 471, but this is
471.
I think it's in the flood omnibus bill too, which is in GovOpsnet.
So it wasn't 397.
It was what?
It was in 397, this language. And then it was taken out by House Government Operations, of what they moved on.
That's what it was, right?
So is it the same, 471 got the same language?
I can
I believe it's the same.
because everybody was asking me about this, and I said, well, if there's any state transfer of property to any community or anything, it has to come through us, and we can put whatever's in the capital bill if we need to.
So I think they took that out and made it.
471. So tomorrow we'll have copies of H 471. That's what we're going to be working off of tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
It's H 471. Because that's what's before us. Okay. You want to let this one, well, Gina's here. You want to let Teddy know?
I can text Teddy.
Yeah, just let Teddy know.
So,
This is the other person on there.
yeah, perhaps more is coming. All I see on 471 right now is a short-term bill, but presently this has been.
Oh, that's right, it is. So if we're gonna work on a short form bill, after we hear some preliminary testimony tomorrow, we have to take a roll call vote to take it off the wall. Okay? So we're hearing some preliminary testimony on it tomorrow. If we're gonna work on it, even if we're gonna put it in the capital bill, I think we still have to vote to take the bill off the wall.
Yes.
Okay? That's right, because there is no language to any of those.
Well, we do have the language here, so that's.
That's right.
So Gina,
Ahead of the game.
Gina is one of the sponsors. She can give us a heads up on where the language, it would be
97.
397.
Yeah, I was slightly involved in that conversation. What they did was they just took out pieces of the flood omnibus bill and put them all in short forms in case there was something with the committee of jurisdiction.
You want me to look at those all
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So these are the other things he gave us, but
Okay.
So have it in 10 places so they.
I told Gina and Teddy to leave some bills for the rest of us.
Okay, so what's next here?
Okay, Agency of Human Services, this was previewed earlier, we're on the top of page 31. Repealing the feasibility study for that Chinden Regional Correctional Facility site, I think there's agreement on that. We come to kind of a big substantive piece here, how to deal with the 3Bs. So talking about ACCD, section 25, the Housing Development Assistance Grant Program. There had been, from what I recall of the discussion, there was not an appetite to have something in the green books. There was a desire for session law to do something, so it would be time limited. I will say I haven't included any kind of sunset provision that would make this go away after 3 years, but you could easily do something like that if you just don't want this to be there anymore. But right now, this is just something in session law. It's not envisioned to be permanent. If you were envisioning something permanent, we would codify this somewhere, probably near the Building Communities Grant. So Housing Development Assistance Grant Program creates the program to be administered by ACCD. Why? To ensure transparency, equity, accountability in the allocation of capital grants through the capital bill to housing infrastructure projects. You'll see I have some brackets in that last line there. I'll clean that up once I have pulled out 19A, section 19A, which is the alternative piece. So the amount appropriated, that $2 million lump sum, that was a reduction from the 3.1. The 2 million in cash is that amount that was appropriated for this program. Subsection B talks about what the funds are actually for. Capital grants shall be used for housing infrastructure projects that ACCD selects through a competitive grant program using project criteria developed under this section. It's important to note for the subsection C, this is providing guidance as to the development of those criteria. It is not setting out exhaustively what the criteria are. So ACCD is meant to develop this program, but this is giving some quite clear guidance as to how they things they need to ensure are built into that application process. So ACCD shall develop criteria for awarding capital grants through the program that ensure that a competitive application, and these are drawn almost directly from Troy, the group's proposal, demonstrates clear readiness for immediate implementation, including through evidence of secured permits, completion of design and planning phases, confirmation of additional funding sources and a realistic timeline for groundbreaking and construction. The application aligns with community and regional planning goals and objectives, provides evidence of local support, including the resolutions of support from local legislative bodies, community input processes, demonstrates partnerships with local organizations, demonstrates that the proposed project will address local housing needs, including by increasing affordability, diversifying housing type, or increasing accessibility to community resources. And perhaps most substantively provides for, these are all quite substantive, but provides for permanently affordable housing units to ensure long-term affordability within the community. So that would be a required component of the program. Doesn't specify, however, any particular percentage, just says there need to be some affordable housing units to ensure long-term affordability.
So have you, we haven't heard at all from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development how this was.
Informally, the commissioner happened to be there when we were in the cafeteria talking about it.
You know, what was
We had a pretty long chat with him, and he said conceptually, they could get on board with this.
And this language tracks what they discussed, so.
I would feel that we really need to have at least the commissioner or the secretary in to talk about. So I don't want to come out with something this big and not listen.
That's fair enough.
Would it be more the commissioner that you spoke to, or would it be Secretary Farrell?
Who's that? Farrell we spoke to?
It was Farrell?
Yep.
So, Bill, let's see if we can get.
Yeah, Commissioner.
No, Commissioner.
So it's secretary.
What is Farrell's commissioner?
He's commissioner.
Yeah.
He's commissioner of the housing piece.
Yeah,
So
DHCD.
we're talking the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, which would be secretary. Oh, that's right, that's Joan. Yeah, she's
Is that
leaving.
recent?
Isn't she leaving?
She's leaving.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking of.
We've got to hear from someone within, so maybe the commissioner of housing, Alex Farrell. Let's see if we can get him in.
But do you have the person above him?
Hmm?
Do you have the person above him?
Well, that would be the secretary,
Well, whoever's the acting secretary, someone should be here.
somebody from the agency.
If you want to do this concept and you feel uncomfortable proceeding with this because you can't get the testimony on this, there's a way to maintain basically the concept that's here, but lessen the requirement. So what it currently says is shall develop criteria that ensure that a competitive application meets these criteria. If you don't have time for testimony, you could say, develops an application process taking consideration of these factors being built. So it is weaker, but it's a way that if you were concerned about the effects of this, you could try to get at the concept in recognition of the limited testimony or time that you have to address this. So you can still get the concept on.
I think we've got time to address it. It'd be Thursday morning to do it. I don't think we'd have time tomorrow afternoon after the floor.
So it's gonna be late,
We
right?
think, well, we've got 6 bills,
Hmm.
7 bills tomorrow. Folks think we're gonna be on the floor late,
Yes.
That's what I heard.
because we don't have all the bills up that were on the calendar today. A lot of them went to Ways and Means and Probes. Yeah, about 6
There's some
bills.
contentious ones.
Is the election bill coming up tomorrow?
Then there's 342.
Which is what?
Privacy.
Privacy. And then
Which is
240 lowers how contracts been going.
Did any of those go to Ways and Means and Probes?
I don't. Well,
Privacy did not. Privacy and election bill are both up.
yeah, they're,
So let's see if we can get ACCD, somebody from there, or Commissioner Alex Farrell to come in and talk through this language section.
25.
Yeah, 25, and somebody will send them a copy of this. Is it 25? Yeah. Because I'm really hesitant to move forward. The other thing that's rattling around in my brain is the housing bill that came out of general is dealing with an infrastructure fund or infrastructure that.
Revolving loan fund.
Revolving fund, yeah.
Yeah, and how does this play into it? Because that infrastructure revolving loan fund is going specifically for these almost last mile or hookups for water, sewer, and roads. So this is exactly what these dollars are to go for. So how does this dovetail?
I don't think it would be in place for these three programs. I mean, it's clear that the desire was to infuse these three programs with approximately $1 million each.
Holly, if it's the same thing you was talking about, said about a 2-year timeline for the other program.
So I'm just wondering, should we try to track some of the language for this that tracks with the language that they did in general?
Check it out,
You
yeah.
could suggest it.
I don't know.
I mean, you want to put this language into their program?
No, I'm looking at the language for the program.
Oh, you want to bring that program specifically?
Well, see if
to
there's
this.
language there that we should also carry for this.
I'm not necessarily interested in creating this as a perpetual
No,
program.
I'm not either, but I'm just wondering if that infrastructure program is going to take hold in 2 years. Should we dovetail? Should we have some language for these three projects?
I think it would be interesting to ask the commissioner if he could foresee waiting on these projects for that program to take hold. I think I know what his answer is going to be.
Right, be no.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest, if we get too much pushback on this language, I'm leaning more towards zeroing it out because we need to be able to defend it to our colleagues. And we need to have these protections in
I
place.
know where that 3 million could go.
That is something that I would draw out too, is like, there are probably reasons to think of the language as distinctive between the revolving loan fund and this, because the particular lead in here is even that it's about creating accountability, transparency within the capital bill process. So I think of the criteria that have been articulated as going to that point rather than abstract goals of a housing infrastructure project, if that makes sense. Like,
And again, that there is a process in place to actually do this fairly for projects across the state.
We also have intent language, and I'm just throwing this out. Could we have intent language that if there's a subsequent program that's established within trying to address affordable housing on a statewide basis or something that just kicks over to that? See what I'm
I'm
saying?
afraid though, if you get too kind of tied in with a number of different groups, do you then lose the sight of what, because they're all kind of going for their own, kind of goal.
and the other thing that you can do is see what happens with the revolving loan fund, and then if this is duplicative of that, you can just repeat, like, this isn't codified, you just repeal this at that point. But there's ways to check in.
Main thing, we don't want to open up the capital bill for these projects. We
Mhm.
just don't have the capacity. And there's a lot of them out there, and the minute they see some of these dollars going already to some particular projects, they're going to be lining up at the door.
Feeding friends.
It'll be a feeding frenzy. It'll be crazy. We just don't have that capacity. And that's why for some of the, we didn't agree as a committee to go with the full 3 million, to go at least with 2 and set up a structure and move it into cash so that you're not opening up your bonded dollars for this, because it's going to be a quagmire if we open up bonded dollars. I mean, it'll be a mess. So there's another piece to this, and I know Troy, you had a conversation with Gus. Who else was in that conversation? Was Joe in
I
that?
was out there, I thought.
Sean?
Were you in the hall? It was right in the hallway. I can't remember.
Remember that with
Sean came
Gus?
late.
Gus Seelig from VHCB?
I came in late on that.
So he had the capacity, he said he had the capacity and the interest to take something like this on. I gave him essentially this language, the same sheet I gave to John. And he indicated that he or somebody from his agency would be here this week sometime. Be able to be here this week sometime.
So would the money actually go,
You're substituting VHCB for ACCD in this language.
so would the money be funneled through VHCB? Because I know that Winston Prouty, that was one of the issues. They didn't want to give VHCB money because they would have to tie into making some of their units permanently affordable.
Oh, it's already in here. I don't know, that's
It
how.
may be a
I did-
specified percentage, I'm not sure, but
Yeah, that's why they didn't want to accept VHCB money, because it would limit what they could do.
Right.
Interesting.
Can you follow up with Gus and see, and then So Thursday morning is when we can talk about this more in depth, and maybe Gus could come in then too.
You want to extend an invite?
Good.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's do that.
but if you could have a conversation with him before, just to see. That works. Okay, what's next here? Let's get.
We're almost there.
we're
To
almost-
call out the final subsections of this grant program. ACCD to administer and coordinate capital grants, widely publicize the grant application process to ensure broad participation across the state. And grant funds not to be used to administer the program. Grants would be awarded competitively, requiring a detailed agreement outlining project timelines, milestones, anticipated outcomes, and provisions for returning funds if the project fails to meet the conditions and timelines specified in the agreement. Not to award any capital grant until the agency has satisfied the reporting requirement, which is the final subsection of this proposal. So prior to the award of any capital grant, ACCD would report to the committees of jurisdiction, you guys, for the committee's approval of the project and application process. So basically a check-in before that program gets launched.
So we would approve the criteria in the application process, but we wouldn't approve whether or not the money was released.
Correct. This would be a one-time thing that happens, basically. So you could have a reporting provision that says, hey, come back once you've developed the application process, but where you have essentially no power. It's just, let me give you notice that these are the application processes we've developed. This is a more fulsome version of that allows you to actually have veto power basically over if you don't like the way they develop the application process, you can say, no, we don't like this. You don't have to have approval required. You could just have a reporting requirement where they come in and show you and you could assume that political accountability is sufficient to ensure that that will be fine.
So if they do this and the criteria is developed and the application process is developed by September of this year,
Right?
Hmm?
Right, you're thinking about the timing.
can we approve something like this as a committee when we're not, legislature is not set?
I don't think so.
That's right, that's right.
So something to think about.
It's a report back, but an approval, we can't take legislative action when we are off session.
I mean, I thought we were trying to hand off that sort of ability or that power anyway. Saying that we as a committee are not fit to judge, right? So.
Well, it's the criteria and the application process. It's not approving the project.
It's the structure of the
It's
project.
the structure of the,
So another way to think about it is you don't have to have the reporting piece if your subsection C is sufficiently strong, right? Like if this spells out that the criteria need to ensure A, B, C, D, ACCD could come back with a program that does an application process that includes other things, but they would be required to include those things. So if you felt sufficiently comforted by the criteria that you've proposed or the guidance that you've proposed, the reporting provisions are less necessary is the way that I would describe it. And I will just say my laptop is going to die shortly, so I would love to get to the last
Right.
section.
yes,
Vermont Veterans Home. This is kind of a technical provision. The emergency generator and boiler replacement. Let me just pull up the underlying.
Federal funds.
Yes, federal funds touch. So, but let me find section 15.
All had enough.
One by one.
In this case, for the Vermont Veterans Home, if the Commissioner of Finance and Management offsets any capital funds appropriated for the emergency generator and boiler plant replacement and elevator upgrade projects that were made in the 2023 capital bill with federal funds, then any offset amounts shall be reused for future capital construction projects as part of the capital budget process. So this is a way of ensuring that reimbursement results in return of dollars to the capital bill.
That's good.
Effective date on passage as is.
Which they've done before.
okay. Just wanted to be clear. So, we're gonna go through,
Connor had his hand.
no, what, you had something.
FEMA checking, FEMA checking.
Yeah, the FEMA check-in while we're off session. what that really, that's what you're talking about,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, and I said this to John yesterday, email. We want to structure it in such a way, we did this. I know we did it when we did Irene, when we rebuilt the Waterbury complex. We did it recently for,
COVID, I thought, did you?
was it for COVID? What it is, John, the only committees that can act while we're off session is joint fiscal or
Okay.
emergency board.
This is ringing a bell with me.
So what we have done in the past for projects that may need to have a go-ahead or a decision made, this is for the capital complex. And for FEMA, you might want to talk to the commissioner of BGS. There may be some decisions that the legislature will have to make this summer and fall, depending on how FEMA or if FEMA comes through. And we have set up a structure where the chairs of the two institutions committees would be part of that joint fiscal committee decision-making on options to go forward. And we did this when we replaced the Waterbury complex, and we've done this in previous capital bills for certain things. So we want something like that for the capital complex here, because we have about 5 buildings that we can't move on until we know what FEMA is going to offer.
Are those specific projects that I can call out, or are we just broadly referencing?
I would talk to the commissioner of BGS for that, because I'm not sure if they want to call out the specific projects or if it's a broader scope. I have a hunch it's a broader scope,
I think it is, yeah.
but there's a conversation we need to have with the commissioner of BGS on that. But the structure would be joint fiscal committee could act, but they would have to include the 2 chairs upon recommendations from the 2 chairs. And the 2 chairs sometimes become members of the joint fiscal committee at the time, or at least upon recommendation of the 2 chairs. And what that implies, for folks not to panic on this side, I'm not going to speak to the Senate side, but what I've always done is whenever a decision in a situation like that happens, I do a variety of things, send out all the information to all of you by email, and then have you all respond back by a certain date.
We've always done that.
Or if it's really, really complicated, to ask permission for the committee to meet sometime to go over it. And then the committee makes that decision. I don't make the decision. I relay what the committee has decided. I think in this one, it would probably be a committee meeting. Probably be what it is. Off session. September, October, or it could be close enough to the session, doesn't matter. We just don't know, but we need to have a little release of the pressure cooker there to allow BGS to take the next step forward.
So this is something I'm saying that may be responsive to this for particular amounts appropriated. Commissioners authorized to use up, oh, there goes my laptop. Okay.
No, it's not that.
There's a proviso at the end that talks about joint fiscal and requires submission to the chairs of the institutions committee.
But this is a little, you know what I would do? I would go back to 2012.
Okay. Yeah, that was 2020.
I go back to 2012, the structure of how we dealt with the Waterbury complex.
Okay.
We've used that structure in different places, and that's the structure. Okay.
Sounds good.
And just think you get to start your morning off with this.
You know, I've got a full morning.
You're gonna get to know us. Better for worse.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah, that was a good comment.
Computer and all.
That was a good comment.
I'm tired.
Compare
I'm tired.
committees. Compare committees.
We appreciate it.
So before the committee leaves, John, you can stay here if you want, because you may end up drafting a letter. Who knows?
Oh, I don't want to drop a letter.
Yeah, his computer's not.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Went over to energy. What occurred over there with DOC? The Wi-Fi.
They're not sold yet, but I think the majority of them think it's probably a good idea. The chair said, we'll wait to see what your letter said. And I just, being
Thank you.
rather simple in that we would be recommending that we support the installation of Wi-Fi via the,
Have a good night.
By lease
by lease.
for $1 million.
What else would you like to know? It was a very good session, a lot more information. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, Commissioner Demmel stressed the value to the corrections team more than the incarcerated, because I think he sensed that giving more opportunity to the incarcerated for the general public gets it was maybe the sticking point.
Did that come out?
Yeah, and two things in particular, upgrading all of their electronic, or their records, rather than using paper is a big thing. And then the safety, he also talked about the safety from the standpoint of not only monitoring the incarcerated, but the conductivity of the cams. What am I saying? The for the right word,
Cams.
body cams.
Body cams.
So that they can not only monitor, but then have a record in case, then they've got a record as opposed to right now, they can't do that. So it was a very good, what, hour, 45 minutes?
So I think if we just had a one paragraph, and I think Brian, you're gonna try to whittle
Happy
it.
to, yeah.
Just so we support, we support, after conversations that the commissioner and the secretary of ADS have had, there's a new direction that we would be leasing the equipment rather than buying the equipment, Wi-Fi, to provide opportunities for, you gotta be really broad to enhance, the work environment for our staff and opportunity for the residents who live there.
Enhanced delivery service.
Yeah.
CCV said they'd be obsolete without it.
In
So
delivery of services, we support $1 million for the Wi-Fi upgrade, and the ability to lease the needed equipment. Keep it really simple.
There was one other thing I hadn't heard before, maybe you all had. Apparently, there's $5 million federal earmark that we can't take advantage of because we don't have Wi-Fi.
I didn't know that.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
For DOC budget,
That's the CCV money.
that's CCV probably, probably CCV.
even so, yeah.
Even right. We have
It's
that.
been there for a couple of years and.
Is that part of the Pell Grant?
We can't use it.
Yeah, it might be, it's probably for CCV. So if you, Brian, if you could do something really high level, because we know that they're kind of split. How many folks are opposed or have questions?
They
One,
didn't take
two?
a straw vote.
They
I was
don't.
just reading faces. That's dangerous.
Well, that's what you gotta do. What I do all the time.
But you've been doing it for a while. This is 9 months. I mean, 9 weeks.
It feels like 9
Over a
months.
week,
It feels like
9 months.
every month, every week is a month.
Yeah.
Every week is a month.
Last couple of weeks are an eternity.
Yeah. Then one day is a week.
There is one other question. Do we make a recommendation as to where the funds would come from?
No.
Okay,
That's up to,
that was a question.
it's up to approves.
I hear you. So if we knew something,
No, it's up to approach. Trevor just needs the support and he will find some money somewhere. But the governor wants to do this, so. That's what I was hearing. So Brian, if you could do something real simple, high level, that would be great. And then we can look at it tomorrow.
Sure.
And then we can approve it possibly. Well, before we approve, I would pass it by that committee, but let me talk to Kath too, because sometimes they just want a broad approval. They don't want to take a vote necessarily.
I'll leave out words like unanimous, yes.
Yes. Yes, you can't use unanimous. So tomorrow we're gonna work all morning. We're really working hard to get our bill put together. We still got a lot of work to put together. The money still needs to come together. We gotta figure out so much of the logistics of moving the money around. And if James can, Diego, if we can find this transportation, what this is all about, we don't have the money for it. But I'd like to know what it's about.
Right, why aren't they coming forward to tell us?
Well, they kind of ask, people ask institutions to see if they've got anything. So to me, kind of
Yeah,
just,
but if we don't know, how
I
do
know,
we
we
say?
need a little bit more specifics in terms of what it is. We don't have the money. Anything else before we go off of YouTube and go home for the day? Okay, see you all tomorrow night.